and speak to Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, Deputy Minister for Information, to also answer what he thinks about his government's performance within the same year that it's been criticized. My name is Nana Ansakwa, and this is PM Express. Well, the issue, as I just mentioned earlier, NPP's assessment of Mahama's one-year governance, and with me in the studio, Dr. Anthony Akoto Osei, former finance minister and also MP for Old Tafo. Doc, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Doc, first of all, just to set the whole thing, I want to find out, what is the yardstick of measuring a president's 1 year in office? I mean, what would be a yardstick?
Well, if you read my script very carefully, it wasn't so much of measuring in terms of grading for 1 year, but pointing out certain economic indicators and seeing whether or not, on the basis of those indicators, one can properly assess the living standards of our people. We are leaving it to Ghanaians to make their judgment. I was asked yesterday to grade Mahama. I didn't grade him, especially since he didn't grade himself. But it's important to put that in the context, because just last week, I heard certain ministers of state in the Mahama administration talking as if Ghana were heaven. But all of us lived here, at least most of us, in 2013, and the challenges that we faced. Of course, if you listen to Mahama, he talked about challenges, but he did not say what challenges. So we were bringing out to the Ghanaian public that these are some of the issues that we as Ghanaians had to live with. Now, if those challenges were not challenging enough, then it's up to Ghanaians to judge. So you see that the format was, look, these are statistics that are coming out of 2013. How did it affect the daily lives of Ghanaians? And we said Ghanaians should do the grading.
The other thing is, you see, maybe because of our political culture, through no fault of yours, I literally expect you to come and say that the government is bad. And vice versa. If you were in government and the NDC was doing a press on your assessment, I expect them to say...
But you're wrong, because I never said the government was bad anywhere in my statement.
No, you didn't use the word bad,
yes,
but you seem to point out the flaws.
No, I said these are the outcomes of their economic management. The outcomes.
Okay.
And the implications of those outcomes on my daily life. So if the outcomes did not help me, I will know. If higher utility tariffs are affecting me, the Ghanaian will know. On the average. It's a statement about average. So it doesn't mean that everybody didn't do well. Of course, we know some people did well, depending on which area they were in. But I'm talking about average Ghanaian. how did we fare in the light of what we saw in 2010? And then went on to 2014 to say, if we keep this way, this is what we expect.
Okay, when I come back, I'm going to take it one by one, and then we seem to go through. One of the issues that came up was Dumso, which was a challenge for everybody. However, historically, we haven't invested in energy. Yes. So by all means, we should accept it, expected Dumso. When we come back, I'll find out what doctor's response is. Hello, and the issue is assessing Mahama's 1 year. And just before one the break, I wanted to find out that as a state, historically, we haven't invested properly towards energy. So, and the nation keeps growing, and we demand 10% increase a year. So there was going to come a point where it breaks. I'm asking, were we surprised of Dumso? But before, Doc, you answer that. In your analysis, did you factor in the fact of the Supreme Court case? Your party took the president to the court for 8 months, and I'm sure within that 8 months there were moments where he was thinking, is it going to be for me or is it not going to be for me? And it might have affected his performance. Did you factor that in?
You see, let's get this very clear. Nobody is disputing the fact that when you have such a long case, it is very likely that some confidence may be lost. I said maybe, because I have not seen any hard evidence saying that because of the Supreme Court case, government could not do A, B, C, D. There's speculation, and it's not unusual. It's possible a few marginal investors, but tell me, during the Supreme Court decision, when public sector workers getting paid, when they're going to work, when ministers in their offices, the normal things happen.
Maybe half of the time we stop to look at the screen to see what's going to happen today, and amicus curiae, we all became lawyers, during the case, and it might have affected productivity.
It may have. I'm not doubting it, but I'm saying that I won't rule that out. But we need to know exactly when we say it affected it, exactly what we're saying. I mean, if somebody comes to me and says that we had lined up $2 billion worth of investments, and they did not bring it because they were waiting, to be a different matter. But the largest money that we're expecting was not from people we didn't know. The Chinese loan. That had nothing to do with the election. 3 years in a row, it hasn't come. So we have to balance it. But domestic work, is it because of the Supreme Court decision that revenue generation fell by 17%? How can one use that as an excuse? If they are lazy, it doesn't matter it's because of the Supreme Court. If you come up with taxes on condoms, on Wellington boots and fishing nets, that will not work and won't bring any revenue. That has nothing to do with the Supreme Court decision. Excuse me. So we should not just find an excuse. That's why you have leadership. Most problems have solutions. Once the court case came, somebody should have been thinking about, okay, A, B, C, D, let's sit down and regroup. You don't just fold your arms.
Okay, let me go to the Dumso. I mean, and again, I'm saying historically, we have not invested heavily in energy, or, historically. So, and the nation is also growing, and we demand 10%, increase in energy all the time, and we don't put in that much energy. I mean, your government, I think it was 6 years ago, put in $600 million, and we are now seeing the generation of the power.
Yes.
So, which means even if you have the money today, it will take you, another 6 years. But since we know that apart from the Bui Dam, which we knew, weren't we expecting Dumso, and how do we blame it on this government?
But in 2009, for example, if they had put in some measures, it could have been realized in 2013. The gas plant, what happened? It should have taken place in 2009, delayed, and then finally went to the Chinese, and we are late. That had nothing to do with the Supreme Court decision. It was 2009, there was no Supreme Court decision. Some decisions were taken. We know that it takes some time. So if you waste time in 2009, the result is obvious. But it was one of the worst times because we kept being told it will be over. If it's not over, let us know the facts. There's no point in deceiving us and saying, right now as I speak, it is not over. I just learned that the West African gas pipeline gas keeps going lower and lower. That had nothing to do with the Supreme Court decision. So let's get to work.
But that wouldn't have directly anything to do with this government either, because he's also waiting, just like you and I, for this gas to come. So if the gas doesn't come...
Yes, but this gas plant, Atuabo, that we are doing now, the decisions had been made in 2008 to be implemented in 2009. We know what happened. Quarrels back and forth, and here we are. So that has nothing to do with the Supreme Court decision either.
Felix Kwachi Fosu have joined us on the phone. Felix, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Felix, you probably should have, or your government should have done something earlier to sort of, reduce the doomso issues with regards to at least our gas project. There's been too many back and forth, and hence it's your fault.
Well, I do not agree with that assertion. Indeed, the government has done all that it can within the circumstances to ensure that we get out of the debilitating energy crisis. It must be pointed out that it is the failure of successive governments to plan ahead that resulted in this. For instance, between 2001 and 2007, the then NPP administration failed to add a single megawatt of generation capacity to what existed, in spite of several warnings from the Energy Commission to do so, because available studies indicated that our energy demand was growing at around 6 to 7% per annum, and therefore it required around 110 megawatts of generation capacity every year in order to keep pace with the demand. But that did not happen until late 2007, when money was sourced to construct the breakdown. Like you indicated in your question to Dr. Osei, it takes quite some time to bring a project of that magnitude on stream. And so we're always going to have a lag in terms of our generation capacity. Mm-hmm. This government ensured a fast tracking of that project and also ensured the construction of the T3 power plant at Kabuade. There's currently another power plant called the T2 that is ongoing, that is expected to be completed sometime in 2015, 2016, which should also significantly add to what we have currently. There are also a number of agreements that are going to come on stream that would ensure that by 2016 we get additional power to bring our total generation capacity to 5,000 megawatts. So it would be completely unfair to blame this government for failing to do something about our generation capacity, which resulted in the Tinsot. As you are fully aware, the Tinsot that we had recently was due to a problem with the West African gas pipeline, which is way beyond the control of this government. I also do not agree with Dr. Osei when he says that the Atuabo gas project was to be implemented in 2009. What we came to meet were just expressions of a desire to construct a gas processing plant. There was no financing arrangement that had been put in place, no proper plans had been made. It took this government to go through the necessary processes to ensure that the gas project comes up. As I speak to you, it is almost 50% complete, and it is expected that by the first quarter of this year, that project will be completed, so that we have access to around 120 million standard cubic feet of gas per day to fire some of our thermal plants. So I completely disagree with Dr. Osei when he blames this government for doing so.
Okay.
On the Supreme Court matter, if you allow me.
Okay.
Yes, Dr. Osei appears to disagree with those who say that the Supreme Court case had a telling effect on our economy. Indeed, there is empirical proof that the Supreme Court case significantly undermined investor confidence in this country. At around 20th December or thereabouts, your sister station, Joy FM, spoke to a number of ordinary Ghanaians to take their perspectives on the performance of government. There was one businessman on that program who said that he was aware, for instance, that his partners in South Africa, whom he was expecting some payment from, held on to that payment until the Supreme Court case ended. And he received his first payment immediately after the case was disposed of. Mm-hmm. So clearly, anybody who is in the business community and who has similar experiences like this gentleman I've referred to would agree that the Supreme Court case had an effect on the economy. The GIPC only last week published a report that showed that foreign direct investments into this country fell by 26%. Also, a couple of months ago, the trade minister had cause to say that he believes that we lost between $1 to $2 billion in foreign direct investment. So there can be no dispute about the effect of the Supreme Court ruling on the economy. Nonetheless, we have not said as a government that we fail to function or we fail to perform our duties as was expected of us. Indeed, we did perform to the best of our abilities and made significant strides in various sectors of our national life.
Now, my next question goes to both of you, but it goes to both of you in different ways, and I'll start with Doctor. Doctor, the question of inflation here, where inflation is now 13.2.
Actually, it's now 13.5.
It's now 13.5.
In December.
Now, we the normal citizens tend to find out that inflation is always an issue when you're outside of government, then it's double, it's no good. As soon as you're in government, don't worry about inflation doesn't matter. So I'm sure Felix will say 13.5 doesn't matter, and you will say 13.5 matters. But why is it that it's only in opposition where higher inflation is an issue, but when you're in government, it doesn't?
Higher inflation is always an issue, whether you are in opposition or you're in government. I don't know any serious economist or serious politician who will say that if you're in opposition, inflation doesn't matter. Why do we say that? Because to the extent that inflation can erode the capacity, the income of all of us, and distort businessmen's expectations, it doesn't matter whether you're opposition or not. So inflation is always a problem. And how we look at it is important. But I'm not surprised that we are where we are. You see, I keep saying that in managing the economy, some things you can't hide. Sooner than later, they'll show up. The Bank of Ghana, I know, has been fighting hard to keep it at a single level. But any fiscal measure that tends to bring additional demand in the system or brings what we call cost-push inflation is likely to do that. So I'm not surprised at 13.5. Because once you adjust petroleum prices, which we did, once you adjust utility prices, they have an effect on general prices and therefore on inflation. So we reported a fact. We don't say that it is your fault, but we're saying that people must live with higher levels of inflation. So, for example, if I'm saving and I'm being given 6% and inflation is 13%, my real wealth is less.
It's negative.
That is all it means. My purchasing power falls. And we are saying that purchasing power has a direct bearing on our standard of living. That is not to say you've done something wrong, but people must know that a 24% depreciation doesn't help all of us. So we need to look at it and see why we are getting 24% so we can bring it down. We are a heavily import-dependent country. So it means that even if prices of goods that we buy from abroad have not gone up, we will need 24% more cedis to buy the same quantity of the things we import from abroad. And if you're heavily import-dependent, it has consequential effects on the standard of living. We are pointing it out. As I said, if you read carefully, I never said this is your fault. But I'm saying on our daily lives, these things have an effect.
Even though you haven't said it's your fault, isn't it an unfair point to highlight, since that historically we haven't created any industries to manufacture?
It's not an unfair thing. I mean, the job of government is to deal with the challenges. And our job is that if they are not, we should point it out to them. It's not unfair. I'm not here to say that, the Mahama government is doing well. That is their job. And they do a good job of telling us. But if we see things that we think that are going in a certain direction, if we didn't, we'll not be helping Ghanaians.
Felix, it's your responsibility now. What are you going to do with inflation and 24% depreciation? Have I still got Felix on the line? I don't think I do. Well, so my point is, it should have... do I have Felix on the line?
Yes, I am on the line.
Oh, good. Felix, 13.5% inflation and 24% depreciation in the city. Now, at the moment, you are the seat of government, so it's your problem.
Well, I agree with Dr. Osei when he has said that the adjustments in some utility prices as well as petroleum products was always going to result in increased inflation. Dr. Osei would appreciate that the decision to adjust petroleum prices as well as utility prices is necessary in order to ensure that government's revenue position is not undermined by the need to subsidize. And so that in itself cannot be too worrying. Dr. Osei would also appreciate that for a long time, the NDC government managed to keep inflation under control. Indeed, for 30 months continuous, inflation was kept below single digits.
Was it artificial?
Could you come again, please?
Was it artificial, or was it like?
It was not artificial. There are those who believe that inflation targeting as a policy is problematic because it tends to be the result of a deliberate policy by government not to spend, in order not to allow inflation to rise. And so people also believe that sometimes you can allow inflation to rise as a way of stimulating economic growth. That argument can go on. But whatever it is, the Bank of Ghana has indicated that they are going to implement measures to ensure that inflation does not go beyond acceptable limits. Indeed, they have targeted to bring inflation back to single digits by the close of this year. As far as the depreciation of the cedi is concerned, it is not unusual to experience some depreciation in the cedi, especially after elections and especially when you have pressure on the currency as a result of high imports resulting from liquidity in the system. You also have to appreciate that with increased wages comes the issue of purchasing power, and therefore the decision to buy more becomes
Felix. So my next question is, I mean, is there any policy or something you've done to at least minimize the reduction? Some basic things that we can do for ourselves that we don't need to, change dollars to import. I mean, is your government doing anything?
Of course, government continues to explore ways to ensure that the manufacturing sector, for instance, or industry continues to grow. Fixing our energy problems, for instance, it guarantees reliable energy to industry, which then lowers their cost of production, which would make them competitive in terms of what they produce, so that there will be no need to import these. We do know that as a developing country, we have a rather wide trade deficit. It is something that successive governments will continue to.
Felix, I'm not clear with your energy and the importation business.
The point I'm making is this: that if you have a manufacturing sector that is reeling under expensive energy prices, they are not going to be competitive. In other words, their products are going to be expensive, so people will rely on cheaper imports. Once you fix that, you are going to address that issue.
But all we are going to fix is the reliability. I don't think the cost has ever come into question.
But once you have reliable energy, they are not going to have to resort to more expensive options. Because once there's no energy for them to use, they are going to have to find additional ways.
Let me put that to the
energy, which is more expensive.
I'll put that to Doctor. Is that enough to bring the cedi down?
It's not enough.
If you get a reliable energy sector now.
Well, they say in economics you can always find some relationship. But in Ghana, our problem is with our currency. It's basically how much export we have. Unfortunately for us, right now we have three commodities that we depend on: gold, cocoa, and oil. Unfortunately, we don't have control over the international price of these commodities. We may have some control on output. 2013, and we mentioned our paper, gold prices were not the best. That you cannot say is the fault of anybody. But cocoa production, we have an influence on that. So, for example, if you fix the roads, you stop. Yesterday, I was telling somebody that I was very angry when I heard that there may have been some smuggling of about 40,000 tons of cocoa across our borders. We have control of our borders. So 40,000 tons of cocoa is not a small amount of cocoa to go. That we can fix. So if what we can control, we should control. What we can't do anything about it. But all that had an effect in terms of the cedi, the pressure.
40,000 tons is a lot.
40,000 is a lot. I hope that is not true, but I was told it was reported on BBC. I mean, you can't cut 40,000 tons by putting it on a human being. So there, as security agencies, must be on the ball. Another thing in the cocoa area that has happened is that the agronomic practices that were being pursued here have been brought down a bit. Sunday, I was discussing something with a cocoa farmer. He was telling me that the insecticides that are used, they are becoming very expensive. So it is not likely that this cocoa season will reach the target that we want. That we have control over. And if we do more of that, we'll be able to export more. And then we need to find other non-traditional exports. Can we do something about pineapples? Can we do? We need. So those things. I'm saying those things we have control over. Agricultural sector. I think it was 3% last year. The year before it was 1.8. The year before it was 0.8. If that sector, which has the dominant labor population in Ghana, is not doing well, then it's not likely that we can export more. So those things we should be able to say we have control over. The more we export, the more foreign exchange we have.
Doc, do we have control over adding value to cocoa, or international relationship is such that we won't buy the added value ones?
No, we do. We do. I mean, nothing stops us from adding value to cocoa. I know some very good friends, medical doctors who live in America, who want to stop medical practice in America and come and add value to our cocoa. There's a lot of money to be made. Cocoa butter. It's not just chocolate, the final end product. There are other in-between things. We need to pursue that. We started. We haven't done enough. Cargill, a few others are around. But we have to provide the incentives and be competitive. But I hear the market for cocoa butter and other similar products is big. It's big. So that we have control over.
Felix, so why won't the president take advantage of this?
Take advantage of what, if you could?
Of adding value to some of our exports. And I've just cited an example of cocoa, and I hear the demand for cocoa butter, it's unbelievable. We can't probably even supply it. And here we are with fine cocoa beans, and we are so desperate to just, send the beans out, adding value to it.
Well, it is something that has always been on the drawing board. Government has always been interested in it. Indeed, it is not this government alone. Various governments have expressed that they have to do so. It is true that it has not materialized yet, but it does not mean that we will not be able to do it one day. You see, there's a fundamental problem with our economy, the way that it is structured, but it will take a bit of time to address it fully. We need to address contemporary issues that we have control over, like Dr. Osei said, and government continues to do that. We will have challenges as and when we adopt some of these measures. But I don't believe that these challenges should be viewed as the result of government's inability or government's failure to take certain steps to address the economic challenges that we face. The depreciation of the cedi, unfortunately, has been with us for quite some time. Indeed, if Dr. Osei would recall, immediately after the launch of the Ghana cedi in July 2007, the cedi took an almost 25% dip by the end of 2008, which was quite worrying. Perhaps as we develop further and as we bridge the trade deficit, which Dr. Osei himself has indicated, contributes significantly to this problem, we should overcome it.
Have I still got you on there?
Hello?
So have you finished the submission? Or? I don't know if
yes, I don't know if it was yeah.
Okay, what I want to find out is that, some of these things in terms of here in 2013, Ghana's experienced an adverse term of trade and international price of two of a major export commodity, which was gold and cocoa. Now, because we don't, we only produce and we don't buy it ourselves. If at one point in time they will decide to buy it at a lesser price or at a higher price, did they come to us as a surprise? Stay tuned, I'm coming back.
Well, it will not. Like I indicated, the ideal situation would be for us to process this cocoa and export the products that come out of it. But we are at a state where we export raw materials, and in many instances, we are unable to determine the price for ourselves. That's why I spoke about the structure of our economy and the unfair terms of trade that exist on the international market. These are issues that can be addressed in the long term. But right now, government is determined to ensure that we have a manufacturing sector that is competitive. That will then enable us grow that sector and then be able to bridge the deficits that exist in our trade. Once that is done, we should overcome some of these difficulties. But I must admit that they are not things that will happen immediately. They are things that will happen within the medium to long term.
I'm going to take a break, and when I come back, that's what I want to find out, because your government and previous government, it's always in the pipeline, on the drawing board. We've thought about it, but I just want to find out when to say we have started. What does it take to say we have started? Stay tuned. I'm talking to Dr. Anthony Osei, former finance minister and MP for Old Tafo, in studio. And on the phone, on the show, is Felix Kwachi-Fosu, Deputy Information Minister. But just before we want to break, I just wanted to find out, what is it that it takes any government to say, this is it, I am moving, I'm going to do it?
It takes vision, leadership that has vision, and knowing where they want to go. I can only speak when we were in President Kufuor's regime, that he wanted to be us to be in the middle income country by a certain date, 2015. We got there earlier than that. So it takes vision. Any government in power, and that's the other problem we have, as a nation, we don't have what I call a long-term plan that has been accepted by most Ghanaians. That the Singaporeans knew what they wanted to do by a certain time. The Chinese have their failed 5-year plans to get a certain place. Malaysians, as a nation, what do we want to be in 15 years? President Kufuor says we want to be a middle-income country. He's gone. So what is the next step? We need to define that and then see what it takes to get there. It may be that once we've defined that, we may realize that we don't want to produce cocoa again, for whatever reasons. We may want to focus on bauxite. So we have not prioritized really. That's what he meant by the structure of the economy. But the vision will determine what structure of the economy you're going to have. Let me take a product like palm oil. The Malaysians got it from here, and now they are ahead of us in the world. And there's plenty of demand. What happened to us?
But we know all these, and we've known. It's not we've even known it. So I mean, what would take, say, look, from next week onwards, all my energies are going into adding value to cocoa. Even 80% of the cocoa that leaves this country should have value added to it. What takes the president to take that initiative?
I cannot speak for the president. I think you have to look at the production conditions. Realistically, can you do 80% in 1 year? And why that 80%? You have to tell me why you want to do 80%, not because it is
because at the moment, I think we're doing what, 5?
No. I think we are trying to process about, I think, 40 to 50%. Now, because we have all those companies, we have to feed them. But for what purpose? The fact that there's a market is not why you want to do it. Why do you want to be processing 80%? Not that it feels good.
To get more money.
If that's the objective, then you ask, what will it take to do that? Technology, investment in technology. By who? Your locals, who is doing it? So you have to look at the value chain and see all the constraints. Last week, we saw the picture of all the trucks at the ports in Takoradi, because even the people who are loading it are refusing to work. That's a constraint. The road. So we need a comprehensive strategy, and that's why governments are elected.
But Felix, that's how great nations have done. Whatever they decide to do, first of all, you set up an education to educate people on that course, and then you build your infrastructure, and you build the whole chain, and it lands there. So even if you start today, maybe in 3 years' time you'll be there. But the thing is start. Now the president has said he's only the only president born in Ghana. Should he be doing the same thing the Gold Coast people did, or are we going to wake up tomorrow and he's going to say, "Look, I'm fed up with all this negativity. Let's move"?
Well, I think that you rightly pointed out that there are a few prerequisites that must be met before we achieve the ultimate objective of becoming an industrialized country. You spoke about the need to fix our infrastructure, the need to have an educational system that turns out graduates that are properly oriented to help us achieve this objective. And all of that is being done. If you notice, this government is embarking on aggressive infrastructure development, which then requires from time to time that we borrow in order to be able to achieve this. Oftentimes, we have come under criticism for borrowing. But when we borrow, it is simply the case that we want to put in place an infrastructure that supports the kind of development that we are all talking about this evening. So perhaps you may require support whenever we are about to take these decisions. For instance, you cannot speak about an industrialized nation if you do not have adequate supply of energy. And that is why in the earlier segment of the program, I alluded to the need to fix our energy so that our manufacturing sector can have access to reliable and cheap energy. I don't believe there's any industrialized country or any country that is getting close to becoming industrialized that suffers from intermittent energy shortages and that has expensive energy. We need to fix that. That is why President Mahama has said that.
Felix, before you move on, you see, I'm not saying we should go full industrialized. Just one product. Just take one product. Egg, shea butter, cocoa, gold, if we can refine. Just one product and just at least achieve 80-90% sort of, added value. I'm not saying we should go and build cars and do this. We don't have the energy for it, but just one product.
I think that any plan to become industrialized must be holistic and comprehensive. So isolating products and processing them, I do not believe is the way to go. You need to have a plan that is consistent, a plan that is forward-looking, a plan that takes care of all the aspects of industrialization. That is where this government is starting from. So back to the subject of energy. If you have 5,000 megawatts of energy, and indeed there are many people who believe that even that 5,000 megawatts will be inadequate to support the kind of
it's well inadequate. 5,000 megawatts is only 2 bulbs per household in Ghana. And for industrialization...
You have done the calculation. But what it means is that a lot more needs to be done. But
exactly. So that's why I'm saying that. So instead of us thinking holistic, let's just start with at least 1 or 2 products that we know that, as for cocoa, we can do 90% value added, or as for shea butter or something, we can do 90% value added. And I'm sure it will, alleviate some cash problems, for government and everybody.
Indeed, there's no shortage of such plans. If you recall, about 2 years ago or so, when President Mahama was vice president, he opened a factory up north, somewhere in Butte, that processes shea butter for export. That is certainly a start. The need to process cocoa has been on the drawing board for some time. I agree with you that it needs to be implemented in a manner that ensures that we benefit from the product, so that we move away from becoming a primary export producer to a country that adds value to these exports in order to attract more income to finance our development. But I agree with you. I don't disagree with you at all on the points that you are making. But I believe that any such plan must be holistic. For instance, if your roads are in bad shape, you cannot be speaking about industrialization, because after the goods are produced, how are you going to cut them to the various ports or points of export? You need to have good infrastructure. If your airports are not in the best of shape, or you do not have enough airports to facilitate quick travel, for instance, how do you industrialize? How do people travel between their countries and yours in order to transact business to boost that particular sector? As I speak to you, Parliament approved a $100 million loan from Brazil to modernize the Tamale Airport into an international airport so that it will complement what happens at the Kotoka International Airport. So gradually we are getting there. I agree that the pace has been slow. For a country that is 56 years old, perhaps we should have done a bit more than we have done. But I don't think that anybody can detract from the sort of effort that has been put in by successive governments, especially this one.
Very good. So I'll come to Doctor, because all this needs money. However, at the moment, the government have borrowed, I think, $15 billion more on top of the $8 billion they came to meet, which you find a bit questionable. But then, if we need to go industrialization and everything, then they need the money.
Yeah, you need investment, and you need money to purchase investment and technology. But everything is not money, because that money has to be used in conjunction with the other inputs. the year 2000, when we came, one of the difficulties we found was that government was spending too much money on servicing its debt, but we were not seeing. So essentially, you were growing just to service your debt. No country can continue to do that. So how you manage your debt is also very important. And that's why we went HIPIC then. And we are saying that the rate at which we are borrowing, we ought to be careful. Because it appears that, not as it appears, 2013, service interest payment, payment of interest was 4.4 billion cedis, more than DACF, Get Fund, and NHIF combined. That is worrisome. if we are not conscious of it, we'll keep that path. Next year, it goes from 4.4 to 6.1 billion. So what it means is that you are generating money only to service debt. I mean, how are you going to make any headway? So you need to be very selective in how you borrow and what you use the money for. That is all we are saying. If you go too much at a certain rate, we go back to the days where you see that all your money is being used. Right now, we hear that, look, domestic revenue next year is tax revenue is about 20 billion cedis. 10 billion is going to wages, 6 billion will go to interest. That's 16. So at best, you can have only 4 billion to invest. That is, at that rate of investment, you're not going to get where you are going. So, and when you go and borrow, you better make sure you can get the money and get the best that you can in terms of the terms and conditions. And this is where we also went and said that, in our view, we should renegotiate the Chinese loan. Chinese loan.
With the wage bill, what can be done about it? It's already done.
I think something can be done about it. There are ghosts on government payroll. And I think that if I were to advise government...
Too many ghosts.
I don't know how many, but if I were to advise government, the two sectors that government should concentrate on are health and education. That's the bulk of our public service. About 300,000 on the teacher side and about 40,000 plus on the health side. You recall what happened in Kolebu when they were demanding that government pay their workers, and government said, look, we don't have money. You find money to pay. Well, when the list they took to government said, vet it. Then they found out that they had people there that government didn't know about. And the education center is a big problem. So I think there's some savings to be made. Actually, the single spine has been implemented. You can't roll it back. So you can't do anything about it. But it's going to stabilize. Once it stabilizes, most people don't want to talk about it, but part of the single spine, I don't think would have gotten where we were if implementation had been carefully done. So government has an opportunity to correct itself. And that is why, for example, it says that the market premium is going to come up with guidelines and so forth and so on. But you can't, and you should begin to, as it were, remove people of subvention. All these matters must be done together. It's not mutually exclusive. Clean up the wage bill. I always cite the example of GIMPA, when Professor Adair decided that they're going to become self-sufficient. Now, they've done it. It's going to take a while. But the public sector wage bill will not go away today. In fact, sometimes you may need to pay more. Why? Because we need more teachers. But the ghost must go. So people shouldn't think that it's a tough question. And I'll tell you why it's tough. And I'll be very blunt. I worked in the Ministry of Finance, and I can say for a fact that you could lay off 60% of the people in the Ministry of Finance and productivity will not fall. I don't know about other ministries. So there's some realignment that needs to be done. It's a tough political question. The chicken before the hen. Private sector must be ready to absorb it if you change it. But perhaps if we need more teachers, then maybe the realignment should say that they are retrained to fill the gaps. So the wage bill itself might not go down, but it will be realigned properly. But as it is, I think it's true for some other ministries. We need to retrain our civil servants.
Felix, there's a challenge. You're going to raise 20 billion next year, out of which you only have 4 million to use for investment. The rest is going to go into wage bill, and then the rest to pay into interest and loans that we have borrowed. So what's the strategy? What do we do? It's a big challenge.
It is a big challenge. Indeed, the idea of enhancing the salaries of public sector workers is not one that can be fought against. I don't think that there's any single individual in Ghana who would oppose any move by government to better the lot of the Ghanaian worker. Nonetheless, in implementing it, it is necessary to ensure that it does not derail government's finances in a manner that stifles its ability to invest in critical sectors of the economy as well. So if you recall, last year, government engaged in several discussions with organized labor. There was actually a forum that was held at Ho, to which many stakeholders in labor, employment, and what have you, were invited. after a discussion, a number of agreements were reached, which were aimed at ensuring that a single spine salary policy did not undermine government's ability to meet its commitments to other sectors of the economy. One of the outcomes of the whole forum, for instance, was the pegging of the annual salary increase of public sector workers at 10%, unlike in the past when they have received between 18 to 20%. Last year, the Minister of Finance broached the subject of engaging organized labor to see whether or not it will be possible to keep salaries at a certain level that does not disturb government's finances. It met with some opposition from organized labor, which is quite understandable. But if we are to manage the single spine and ensure that it does not affect government's ability to respond to other critical needs, then there's a need to have this discussion. There's a need to be frank about the matters involved.
Doc has a follow-up. Doc has a follow-up question.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What was the basis for the 10%, if I may ask?
Well, it was intended to allow for space for government to be able to meet other commitments. Indeed, it was agreed upon between government and organized labor. It was not an imposition, and it arose out of the whole forum because all parties recognized that if it went beyond the increments, went beyond a certain level, it was going to affect government's ability to have additional revenue.
But I guess what I was asking was that the massive, what I suspect, and that's why I was trying to get that, at that time, the projection for inflation, if the projection was inflation was single digit, then 10% would have been adequate. So then it was incumbent of government to keep inflation below 10%. Because normally that's how you come at the number. Keep the real income at least the same. I suspect, and now that it's gone over, that's why I'm a bit worried.
Fellas, I've got a few minutes left.
It is true. It is true that we projected to achieve single-digit inflation. That target was missed. Beyond that, however, was the reality of taking into consideration how much government could pay out of the resources that was available to it. That is why we managed to get organized labor to agree with us to take a 10% increment instead of the anticipated 18 to 20%.
Felix, before I let you go, $23 billion is such a huge debt. And are you cutting it down or are you borrowing away till the kingdom come? What do we do? Because that is obscene.
Yeah, whilst we understand concerns that have been expressed about the need to manage our debt so that it does not lead us back to hate, it is also important to appreciate that as a developing country, we have certain critical needs that must be met. Our infrastructure is not at a level that supports the kind of growth that we are all yearning for. So it is absolutely imperative that we fix that infrastructure. Now, this sort of infrastructure development requires huge resources that we are unable to meet with our current.
Felix, as a layman, and even in the media, I haven't seen 10 billion worth of investment or infrastructure in the country.
I disagree strongly.
If Bui Dam costs 600 million, are you saying that we have about 15 Bui Dams dotted in the country?
Off the top of my head, I can tell you that in the water sector alone, government has plans to ensure that we move urban water coverage from the current 63% to 85% by 2015. Because of that, from the middle of 2012 to date, almost $700 million has been pumped into almost 30 different water projects around the country. If you go into the area of health, for instance, I'm sure you've passed by the Race Hospital recently, and you would have seen that contractors have moved to site to undertake an expansion project. That cost us about $250 million. Currently, the Legon Teaching Hospital is also they are going to start construction there. That is another $185 million. I spoke earlier to you about the Tamale the Tamale airport that is expanded. And the Pan Nkrumah interchange, that is a 74.8 million euro project. I could go on and on. So there is verifiable
I'll get Dr. to come in
to support this sort of expenditure. But the point that I wanted to make that even this level of infrastructure development may not be enough to get us to achieve the sort of development that we want.
1 minute. Let me get Doctor to make an interjection.
Felix, if I may advise a bit. Sometimes politicians, one of the difficulties we put ourselves in is that as you're speaking, people are thinking that last year $700 million worth of investment went to the water sector. We may have borrowed $700 million, But sometimes, because of our absorbent capacity, if you go and check how much has been disbursed, you may be surprised to know that maybe even less than 100 million has gone in there. But when people hear 700 million, then the expectation is that, like you asked, if it's 700 million, where is it? But we may have borrowed 700 million, don't get me wrong. But when we use those numbers, we have to be careful. And that's why we are worried about the Chinese loan. 3 billion, only 600 million has come. There's a disconnect. So I'm saying this because, as an example too, if you go to the World Bank, you find out, and I'm sure you know, that half of the money we've borrowed is sitting on there because of implementation difficulties. So we need to realign all these things and maybe sometimes reprogram. That's why I say sometimes it is not a lack of money. It is how we use
Gentlemen,
it.
thank you very much. Felix, thank you so much. I wish I had more time so we can discuss further.
It is rather unfortunate that time
I know. It's such...
I would have given specific examples of the...
What I'll do is I'll find out from production if we can get... And I can even get you in studio so we can, talk better.
I would appreciate that.
Good. I've enjoyed the conversation and the education. Doctor, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Viewers, it's been brilliant. My name is Nana Ansakwa. And as I said, tomorrow we'll be talking to Asamoah Boateng on personality profile. Do you know he was a baker? Well, stay tuned and listen to it. And thank you very much for watching.